Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dice Commando YouTube channel. I'm Andrew, with you here as always. This is the Commando Cast, a video cast about all things Star Wars Destiny. This video and others like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. Please show your support with a like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss any new videos. If you want to get involved with the channel, consider becoming a channel member. There are many benefits to channel membership, including access to our Discord, exclusive deck tech and strategy videos, and the opportunity to help create channel content. I want to sincerely thank all our channel members, as I truly couldn't do this without your support. You guys rock. Go Commando.
Hello everyone, welcome to Dice Commando and the Commando Cast. I'm Andrew with you here as always, talking something a little unorthodox for what we normally talk about, but I think cool nonetheless. So today we're talking product development cycles as applied to playtesting, design, and continuous improvement. So why in the world are we talking about something like this on Destiny Friday? Seems like you should have talked about this to your engineering class and just come in and told us more about DAC benthic. The reality is, though, we live in a world where a lot of fan sets are being made, and a lot of those people are doing this really for the first time. And realistically, I see basically every parallel to bringing an actual product or piece of software or something like that from design to market. It's exactly the same thing that what a lot of these teams are trying to do with their fan sets, right? They're not just trying to create a cool card and throw it on the internet. They're trying to deliver a fully usable product in the end to us, the player base. And a lot of these people are doing this for the first time. They may have no experience not only designing and playtesting cards, because how many of us really do, but fundamentally, whether you have that experience or not, knowing how the process should work, knowing how to run the team specifically, not just being a project manager of it, but knowing what the structure of really the process or the cycle should look like, I believe could be beneficial for a lot of the people who are considering, starting up their own project. So let's be very clear. I've had an extensive background in product development through my personal career. And I've learned a lot of things, not just in the way that my own company does it, which, to be very clear, we're not talking specifically about my company here. We're not talking specifically about bringing one type of product. We're going to instead talk, product development theory. And just to throw it out there, when I was in grad school, I also, in many cases, learned the way to not do things. So I've seen things from the good side, and I've seen things from the bad side. So let's go ahead and talk about the product development cycle or the product development process itself. And really, fundamentally, it's broken down into 5 pieces. Where we start, where any product starts, where any fan set will start, is with the architects, right? And the architects, they ask, what does this look like? They own the initial concept and kind of the product plan or objectives. They define the parameters and constraints. From there, it moves to pathfinding. Now, I do want to point out as we go through this graphic, the arrows do matter. You'll see some of them go in one direction and others go in 2 directions. And that is meant to illustrate the flow of information, which is very important to something that we'll kind of talk about a little later as it applies to division of labor. Right, so the architects dump down to the pathfinding team. You can call it something else if you want, depends on what your company or whatever. But fundamentally, they're the ones that ask the question, okay, we know what the product's supposed to look like. Now, how do we do it, right? How do we fundamentally do it? So they come up with the design of the fundamental methods and mechanics, right? These are the components we're going to use. This component doesn't exist. Maybe we need to invent this component, and they'll invent the component. From there, and then, of course, they can flow upwards. So they'll talk to the architects and say, hey, this component doesn't exist yet. It might cost us more, take us more time. Back to the architects, and then they can work it out. So those two work in concert. But once it leaves pathfinding kicks it out to what we would consider to be the product development team, which is how do we actually make this work, right? Not what's it going to look like. We know what it's going to look like. We know the plan for how we're going to do it. How do we actually make this work, right? If you're looking at something like a computer program, it's like, all right, we have all these various things of codes. How do we make it fit together and actually be a usable website or something to that effect, right? If I'm building a computer, how do I make all the various components of the computer work so that the system actually turns on or works or can do what we want it to do? So they're saying, how do we actually make this work? They develop the overall product. Furthermore, they optimize the interactions between the various components. And that's the important thing, right? It's not just having an on switch and having a light bulb. You have to make sure that when the on switch is flipped, the light bulb actually comes on. Next, we go into product ramp. And again, this can be called different things, especially in software. You're probably not ramping it up. But what you're doing is you're really taking the design and you're making it work at a larger scale, right? Okay, we have our website designed such that we can operate it in our, off our system, but when we expose it to the internet, it breaks. How do we make that work, right? So ramp asks the question, how do we operate or manufacture at a larger scale? They identify and resolve the issues that occur as volume or usage increases. They improve back-end processes and increase efficiencies. And then finally, in the end, it goes to HVM, which is high volume. This is, in many cases, the end user base. But then, the people who are managing that, which is how do we continue to improve the product or process? They are going to optimize performances, yields, reduce costs, basically just improve, make it a better product overall, and maximize functionality. Right? So with that said, what you can do is you really break this down into three sections if you really think about it, right? Looking at those information flow of areas, or information flow arrows. At the top, we have what we would consider to be design. We then have the development guys. Then we have what in most cases is manufacturing. Now, this could be, in case of like a website, it could be, the website owner or the system owner for a piece of software or something like that, right? But you have design, development, and manufacturing. And again, I want to point out very clearly here, and then we'll go in and talk about how it actually matters to us as, card guys or fan set designers. You have this flow of information and you have a natural break in that flow. Once it leaves design, it goes to development and development starts working on it. Development doesn't come back and say, what we're doing is really hard. We need you to redesign it. They take the design, they take the objectives, they take the initial parameters, and it's their job to make it work. Likewise, manufacturing at the high volume, right? If some end user comes back and says, this doesn't work, or I'm having some problem, whatever, manufacturing or the end user base or whatever it is, they don't come back and say, you developed this product wrong, right? Because there's a natural flow. It shouldn't, like if development's having problems and obstacles, they can't go back and redesign the product. And likewise, if when we go to manufacturing, when they're trying to make 10,000 of them a day versus 3 a day, they can't say, well, we can't make 10,000 for the right cost. You need to redevelop the product, or you need to redesign the product. It doesn't work that way, right? And intentionally, the guys that are involved in design aren't the ones doing the manufacturing. The guys involved in development aren't the ones doing the design, right? It's intentionally broken up and separated with the division of labor, right? It's that intentional separation, division of the team roles that really leads to a lot of success in this process itself. Okay. Now, finally, we have what's called the process integration team, or the integrators. And this is typically led by the product owner. And it can be called various things, right? The team lead, the project manager, but the product owner is the term that we'll use. And this is the individual teams that are allowed to hop groups, right? They can take information from one group and bring it back to the other one and say, hey, here's what we're learning. Let's feed this backward. Let's feed this forward, whatever it may be. They look at changes proposed downstream, like somebody says, hey, we can save money if we just tweak this little thing. Is that going to make the product work or not? So they can bring that back and forth. Now, this is purely a project management role. The individual is not involved or responsible for any one particular deliverable. And again, that's also important. If the integrator was involved in design, they would naturally want to protect their design. That's just the way we as humans work. If they were involved in manufacturing, they would put pressure on design to change, which in many, many cases you can't do because it actually changes the overall product. So in small teams, this role is usually held by the project lead or the project manager or the team lead or design lead or whatever it may be. In larger teams, this group is typically led by that person, but there's always one person accountable for all of it, and they're generally the person who's in charge of the product overall. All right, so now let's talk about if we were to design, like let's look at the ARH guys, right? How do they design a set? They have fundamentally, or let's not even look at ARH, right? Let's look at the original design of any TCG. There's the design teams, right? These are the guys that come up with the set plan and themes, the overall concept, the new mechanics, the basic card designs, and they come up with kind of the fundamental archetypes and pairings. In other words, they come up with the card design, right? This then goes to playtesting. Playtesting in all functional, if we were to equate it back to what we're talking about, it's playtesting is your development. They look for the non-intended integrations with the overall card pool. They identify balance issues. And then lastly, we have the high volume manufacturing portion, which is the balance, errata, and restrictions. And this is to fix and balance things that come out once it's released. Once the product is released, people start finding problems with it. That's the continuous improvement part of this. And what you see is this does that's the way we independently looked at these, but when you put them side by side, you see that there's natural lines, design and design, development and playtesting, manufacturing, support, whatever it may be, and balance errata, the continuous improvement part. Right? You literally see that if you look at how a fan-made set goes from start to finish, it matches almost entirely how a traditional product in the real world, quote unquote, would be developed. Right? So there's literal parallels that we can learn from this. Now, I do want to kind of put in a caveat that a lot of times when we're dealing with card design, you're dealing with very small teams. So it does make it harder to have that division of labor. But we do run into this problem consistently. Again, I've play tested for 3 games. Well, 4, because one never actually made it to market. But I've play tested for 4 games over. And I consistently see this happen. And yes, a lot of it is due to small numbers of people. But what we see is that the design teams in playtesting have this constant back and forth. Playtesting will identify a problem, and they'll kick it back to design to be redesigned. But there's a problem with that, right? The problem with that is when playtesting kicks it back and they get a completely new design, playtesting has to completely start over. And there's no way that playtesting I won't say no way, but it's very hard for playtesting to succeed in an environment like that where they're constantly having their environment changed, right? It's very hard to go out and find these weird interactions when your interactions are constantly changing. Right, and then last, of course, we have balance errata restrictions. That is always a one-way arrow because once the set's released, it's released. And there are people out there like Gandork, for example, who are the protectors of not wanting to errata a card because it's already been made, right? Because you don't want to have something that's already been printed be changed. And that's a completely, that is 100% the right way to do it. Every action should be taken to not have to errata a card unless there's an actual problem with it and we have to. Okay? So this is where, like I said, a lot of the problems come, is design being involved with iterative improvements. The iterative improvements can cause problems. It leads specifically to, like I said, complete redesigns on OP versus a balance fix approach, right? Should we go back and should we redesign our card completely just because it was OP? The answer is no. We should balance that card and make it fit within the OP-ness. And then furthermore, you often will see, especially on design, and especially in a game like Star Wars, where we are so passionate about the theme and the content, right? Well, this is my favorite character ever. It's okay if he's a little OP. Well, A, no, it's not. And B, if the playtesting comes back and says it's too strong, you don't have to redesign your character. You just need to tweak him, right? But when you're involved on both sides, you not only get kind of that emotional thing, but you also get a little bit of an echo chamber. And the largest risk we have here is that no separation, like I mentioned with the echo chamber, no separation can lead to design hive mind, where all of a sudden everybody starts thinking the same way and they don't really go out and solve things independently because they're working together to design and playtest at the same time. All right, so this is just my little mock-up here, a diagram. But I've playtested for teams in the past that have different playtest cells. And that's kind of what I'm drawing here. So I think this is a very good type of schematic design for how one should really run their design and playtesting teams. Your design teams, now remember, I'll go back up and I'll show it here real quick. Right, the specific colors I'm using here matter because they're trying to draw the eye, right? But remember, we have design, which are your guys responsible for the set themes, the initial card design. And then we have playtesting, which is the guys to make sure that those card designs are balanced within each other and propose the fixes. The playtesting is really the meat, the product development, right? The product development guys are the meat of what happens as long as they're allowed to do what they're supposed to do. So what I think is a successful model here is you have the playtest leader. In many cases, this may be the team lead or the product lead, the set designer, right? The set lead, whatever you want to call it. He has team leads that report directly to him. each team lead can talk to the other team leads, and they also talk to their playtest cell, right? Their own little Spectre cell, if you will. The Spectre cells, though, this playtest cells, cannot talk to each other. They can only report to the team lead. This prevents basically the entire playtest population from getting that hive mind approach. It also allows for a divide and conquer approach, right? The playtest leader can come in and say, I want you to look at blue hero. I want you to look at red villain this week. And then 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, next week, you switch it up and make them look at something else, right? And that keeps everybody on their toes. It makes sure that there's a lot of valid perspective instead of the whole group going and attacking this because it's the new problem, the whole group going and attacking this because it's the new fix, and so on and so on and so on. And by having these layers of removal, not only do you, again, prevent that hive mind thing, but you also keep it segregated so that ideas are kept within their own thing, right? Playtest cell can say, we really think that card A is really good. Playtest cell, and then that's all that A can think about is, well, card A is broken. This is all we can really focus on. But the other cell thinks that team, card C is broken, and they can focus on that. And then the leaders can talk amongst themselves and kind of figure out where to go. And then the playtest leader can decide what he wants to bring back to the design teams for changes. So again, you have multiple layers of separation. It prevents the like think and allows for divide and conquer. And one thing I want to add here that's very important, right, is if the team, right, whoever the playtest leader is, in many cases, like I said, I think it'll be, the overall designer, the project manager, the set lead. That person should not be involved in design, because the minute that person has emotional stake in the design, they're naturally going to be skewed to go with design over playtest. And it definitely has to be, right, playtesting has to dictate what comes out, regardless of emotional, regardless of theme, regardless of anything. They can take those proposals back, get redesigns, tweaks, and bring them back to the playtest team. But the minute that person in charge of making the information goes back and forth has a bias in either direction, it certainly complicates the process. So I realize we started kind of a chalk talk, and hopefully you understand kind of what I'm talking about, right? There are a lot of companies out there. Again, I have a lot of experience with whether it be software, whether it be hardware, whether it be, making food, whether it be a chemical process plant, whatever. The product design process, by and large, has proven to be successful in this manner. And I think by taking a lot of those learnings and applying it to what we're trying to do, by getting a usable set product out the door in the hands of the people where we have to make the least amount of changes in that high volume sector, the most successful way to do that is to look at how companies for hundreds of years, right, especially in the last 100 years of, industry, how do we successfully develop products? And we should absolutely apply those learnings to how we do business as well. So that was just kind of my takeaway today. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and hopefully, or maybe not enjoyed it, but hopefully you thought that it was valuable to have that discussion. So I'm curious to know what you guys think, what kind of experiences you've had. Again, like I said, I understand that a lot of the people who are doing the set designs or who are involved in playtesting, not only have they not done this before, but for many of them, this might be their first game, right? So perhaps there's just too much learning curve going on to completely understand, the full ramifications of why things are done certain ways, why there's a division of labor, and why that division of labor is really, really important. Again, like I stress, especially in a game like Star Wars, where we are emotionally connected to many of our characters, having design directly impact playtest or vice versa can cause a lot of conflicts, and that's how we get busted things coming out, right? That's how we get sets that have problems coming out. So for success in the future, I thought maybe I'd throw my 2 cents in from a project manager standpoint. Maybe it's not just from a team lead, maybe it's from a playtester. How do we structure playtesting? Anyway, just like I said, I just wanted to throw some ideas out there. So again, thanks for joining me for what is certainly a very odd cast. Nothing else, guys. Go Commando.